Welcome to GCSE History. Today we're going to be answering two key questions: what it is you will be studying and why you should take GCSE History. This is going to be a short video giving you a flavour of what GCSE History will be like. If you have any questions, then please do get in touch. The door and email inbox is always open. Let's get started. GCSE History is made up of 4 topics of study spread over 2 exams. These include Germany, Health and the People, Conflict and War in Asia, and the Norman England. In total, there are 18 questions spread over 2 papers, and only 2 questions check for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. We start off in Germany, where we're introduced to cabaret in the 1920s, and question why people were burning money instead of buying fuel with it, and contemplating why, if this man, Gustav Stresemann, had not died, Hitler may never have had the opportunity to rise to power. How did the German Workers' Party become so popular, especially after Hitler's first attempt to take power had ended up in prison? And once Hitler became dictator, how did he keep his power? Was it his sinister use of the SS and Gestapo? Or was it the violence he showed towards the Jews? Or were people simply won over with his promise to supply them with free VWs or the popularity of the Hitler Youth Organisation? You decide. Next, we move on to the bloodier part of our course, the history of medicine. We look at the journey we've been on, from drilling holes into people's heads in order to stop headaches, to modern-day sophisticated techniques such as keyhole surgery, gene therapy, and social distancing to stop the spread of disease. We've come a long way. On this journey, we'll look at why leeches were all the rage in the Middle Ages, and why there was so much opposition to the introduction of anaesthetics and vaccination in the 1800s. Some people were actually opposed to pain-free surgery. We look at why opposition existed and how new techniques were finally accepted. Fun fact: before the discovery of antiseptic techniques, should you fall and suffer a compound fracture, that's one where the bone punctures the skin, there was a 90% chance that you'd have your arm or leg amputated. And then, because of a lack of understanding of how disease spread, there was a 50% chance you'd die from the infection. Our third topic of study focuses on the development of the Cold War and how similar the conflicts of Korea and Vietnam were. We'll find out how the actions of Truman and Stalin led to these wars, and how throwaway comments made by generals can change the outcome of a war. We'll consider the Viet Cong's aims, support, leadership, and guerrilla tactics, and ask whether the Gulf of Tonkin was the main reason for the escalation of the Vietnamese conflict. We'll look at the development of warfare and the use of Agent Orange and napalm. It's hardly surprising that when events such as the My Lai massacre were broadcast on TV, there were lots of protests across America when civilians realised what was happening. Finally, we leave Vietnam and head to Norman England. Who were these descendants of Viking Norsemen who settled in northern France, and why did they want to control the land of the Angles? We'll look at the most famous battle in British history and wonder, if Harold had lived, how different our lives would be now. We look at how the Normans ruled using castles and cavalry, and consider why William I may have caused a bitter 1,000-year rivalry between Northerners and Southerners. We'll see how life changed for the people of England and how they had to adapt to life under the control of their Norman oppressors. And of course, a study of medieval English history wouldn't be complete without an appearance from the Catholic Church. We'll see how William used his papal support to his advantage and admire the biggest church building project ever embarked upon. Who knew we'd still be using Westminster Abbey nearly 1,000 years later? There's also an environmental study which can focus on any Norman historical monument in England. This could potentially include Colchester Castle or Castle Hedingham or any other Norman monument. Now, I could go on about how the history department have excellent exam results, that the history teachers have excellent subject knowledge, and they aim to make every lesson fun and interesting. And you can also have peace of mind knowing that we have a thorough revision programme. I could also ramble on about how history can open many doors, as the skills of a historian are wide ranging. I could tell you that many lawyers, journalists, event planners, and even prime ministers have history GCSEs. And I could also mention that the ability to argue and justify your opinion is a lifelong skill, as is the ability to spot fake news by questioning what you are reading. But there's a more fundamental reason for why you should study history GCSE. It's your duty to pass the torch of civilization on. A few years ago, I was talking to an elderly relative, and I asked her what she had done if she had evacuated to a village in World War One. And she replied that they didn't go in for evacuation during World War One. In fact, she doesn't really remember anything different. The streets were generally the same, and she just played with her friends. Once in a while, people were a bit panicked, but she didn't remember anything else. Well, this is history. It isn't always glorious or profound or particularly poignant event, but it is who we are. Our stories are passed from one generation to the next. By taking history for GCSE, you are picking up the torch of human civilization and carrying it on. Even telling you the story of my elderly relative keeps her memory alive long after her death. History is the story of who we are, where we have come from, and where we'll be going as a result. So pick up the torch, and thank you for listening.